Let's turn to some specific questions. We've got one here that's been sent in by a manufacturing company here in the United States, and a specific question about document retention policy and organized document storage. Now, this has been the sort of elephant in the room, I think, for all of our conversations, is the enormous challenge now around document retention. Jim, do you want to lead off on your thoughts on document retention?
Absolutely. So you said document retention policy. I think what we need is document retention policy and program, with the emphasis on the program.
Right.
The policy creates the corporate reality, but you got to have a program that's effective. It is the number one protection for both sides, balancing the ability to conduct an investigation, sift through the information to come up with the relevant data, and make the decision that you need to make, as well as control costs. So with 60 billion emails generated daily, and the average user...
I'm getting most of those, by the way.
and the average user having 30 or accumulating 30,000 emails a year, this is a lot of data.
Right.
So you've got to have a program that provides the governance structure. You have to have a program that provides the systems and processes to implement it throughout the organization. You've got to automate it in some way. You've got to have something that can ultimately be managed, audited, and can drive behaviors throughout the organization. It's the number one protection an organization can have. And then second, it's got to be done in advance. When things go wrong, isn't the time to say, let's put in place a document retention policy and program, everything from 2 years ago, get rid of it. That's not the way it works.
Yeah.
So you've got to put it in place in advance. It has to be responsive to the legal and regulatory framework and statutory requirements for each type of data, and then also taking in mind what data do we need to preserve for the operations of the business itself. And that's decisions that are unique to each organization and must be answered within that organization.
And David, presumably there's a conflict between, we've already accumulated lots of data, and if we don't have this policy in place, we've got this kind of backlog of tsunami of information. How do we get that balance right between what we do in the future and what we haven't done in the past?
Well, and Jim's absolutely right. If you have the right program in place, you can start addressing this issue. No one climbs Mount Everest in one step, right? So you want to put in good practices, and it is a program. Like any compliance program, yes, the policy is the standard, but you need to teach the standard, train the standard, and then grade on the standard. If it isn't graded, let's be honest, everyone in a business has other jobs to do. Right. They make money doing other things than just managing records. And so we need to make this as easy and as simple for them as possible. And logistically, your records management function, whether it's in compliance or legal or elsewhere, needs to be able to administer it with as little friction as possible. It can't be some bureaucracy that sits on top of everything else, because then it'll have no value and nothing will change. This is really about change management. At some level, at one point in our lives, we kept everything, and now we realize we can't. It's killing IT, it's hurting legal, it's hurting compliance, and it's hurting the business because they can't find the information they want. So, I have this, what I call the bathtub of information. I've been accumulating information for years, potentially decades. I've stuffed it into all kinds of corners and cracks. I don't even know what a lot of it is. Well, you can turn your attention to that, and there are good ways to do good data disposal. Information grays out over time. That unlabeled box from 1970 probably isn't all that valuable, and the risk of disposing of it is probably pretty remote. You don't want to spend more money on disposal than you would if you actually reviewed the document. I find people tend to create very elaborate procedures. But the most important thing, you have to understand, we're on an exponential curve for data. What gets created in the next 2 years is going to dominate what was created in the last decade.
Right.
Yep.
So look at the faucet. Focus on the faucet. Make good practices now, because your bathtub will gray out. You will eventually be able to deal with that, and it'll become less valuable, less risky, less costly for you. If you keep getting inundated with data, you'll never get ahead of the curve. You have to be proactive about this.
And I think there's two sides of data as well. So there is the unstructured data, so user-generated content. But a lot of people also forget about the structured data. So those things that are fed into the databases that we use to make management information decisions within our business itself. And then just on the data itself, people tend to hoard data. It's a prized asset. So building a program comes across the basic human behaviors of, no, this is my data, you can't take it away from me. And that's really got to be managed for it to be an effective program.
And if you're going to incentivize exactly that, to get away from the hoarding activity, you have to realize that the incentives are skewed for each individual employee. They see a lot of value in their data, and the cost of handling that data is externalized to the company. And so they don't see the actual cost of the fact that they have,
There's no pain
gigabytes.
point for them.
That's exactly right. But they see, oh, I'll be the hero because my supervisor is going to say to me, oh, I get that email from 2 years ago? Aha, here it is. Right? Oh, I'm the hero. That kind of just-in-case retention is a thing that the company needs to address. It needs to, and that has to start from the top. They have to see that value is not a value we want to share inside the community. That being said, then the people say, well, wait a minute, I can't do any of this because I got dozens of litigations, investigations going on. I'm never going to be free, so I can't really do this. Well, you can do it. You just have to be careful that you don't violate your preservation obligations and your regulatory obligations. But even in that complex environment, this is a program that can be done as long as you take the right steps and don't try to do it all at once.